Joining us now to discuss the president's comments, the troop withdrawal, and much more is Illinois Representative Adam Kinzinger. He's an Afghanistan and Iraqi war veteran and a member of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. Welcome to America's Forum, Representative Kinzinger, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
We have an awful lot to talk about, so let's get started with some numbers right up front here. There are 32,000 American troops in Afghanistan. So according to President Obama, that number would be reduced to 9,800 after this year, then cut in half by the end of 2015. And by the end of 2016, only a small force, which he says is large enough to protect the embassy in Kabul and help the Afghans with military purchases and other security matters, that will remain. So here is the very simple question that I guess America wants to know. We look at these numbers. Is this enough to get the job done in Afghanistan and still protect our interests there?
No, absolutely not. I mean, look, initially when I had heard that the president was going to talk about 10,000 troops, and it's always funny because it's not 10,000, it's 9,800, right? And but when I heard that, I was like, okay, well, this is the bare minimum needed in order to do the mission that we want to do. Two of them. Number one is to advise and consent with the Afghan government and military, and the other one is the idea of counterterrorism. That's simply killing and capturing al-Qaeda and people that are a threat to the mainland of the United States. So I initially said, all right, 10,000, that's somewhat agreeable. The problem is now the president did exactly what he did in Iraq. I was shocked that he hasn't learned his lesson from Iraq. He gave a timeline for withdrawal and said, by the end of my presidency, in essence, I will have ended 2 wars. I think he is more concerned with his legacy at the end of 2016 than he is with doing what's right for Afghanistan and for the United States of America. A residual force of 10,000 people in at least for perpetuity for a little bit, even for the next 10 years, is a very small commitment on our end in order to ensure that these hard-fought gains that we've achieved are hung on to. Instead, we're going to see, I think, Afghanistan end up like Iraq.
Now, you just spoke to something that I hear from an awful lot of people. Please, if you will, I guarantee there's people out there saying, much like me, explain to me the tactical advantage of telling your enemy exactly what you're going to do and exactly the time you're going to do it and exactly the number of people that are going to be sitting on the ground in order to face off against them if, again, they take up arms against us. Please explain the tactical advantage of that.
There is zero tactical advantage, and it's utterly unbelievable because I'm at the point of saying, and I'm a big believer in the mission in Afghanistan, but if you're going to say, okay, they're all out by 2016, why are you going to leave anybody there? So here's the point. You say today, the president says today, that training and advising the Afghan military and government is an important mission. He also says that killing and capturing al-Qaeda is an important mission. I think everybody would agree on that. So why is it that in December 31st of 2016 that's important, but in January 1st of 2017 that's no longer an important mission? And why does the president feel the need to be the one making the decision to end America's war in Afghanistan versus giving that to the next president to make a strategic decision? That's what President Bush did in Iraq. He had a status of forces agreement into halfway into the next president's term to allow the next president to make the decision. I believe President Obama made the wrong decision, but that was a classy move by President Bush. And unfortunately, that same level of class is not extended to this president.
Now, Secretary of State John Kerry appeared on the morning shows, and he made a couple of comments on CBS Morning News that I caught and a lot of others did. And they rang a bell with me, and I wanted to get your reaction to this as well. One of the announcements that he made is that the U.S. is setting up a $5 billion terrorism partnership fund to help other countries push back against radical extremists. Okay, first question. How do you keep this from becoming a black hole where you start pouring in money to begin with and you continue to pour more money and more money and more money as we go down the road?
You don't, and I think that's the problem. I mean, why? Look, here's what you see in this administration. Every one of I talk to ambassadors from our friends a lot, and they all are saying what's happened to the United States of America. When you have the Secretary of State have to come out and say the United States of America is not retreating from the world, well, that shows that the world thinks we are retreating. And as I've said to the administration, okay, that's fine. You don't think we're withdrawing from the world. Well, tell our allies that. And why are our allies getting the wrong impression? So this is an attempt, and same with all the things you're going to see from this administration, to try to stop the bleeding, whether it's VA, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's any foreign policy, red line in Syria, all these blunders that they have done that they're now trying to recover from, and it's just, a $5 billion terrorism trust fund or whatever it's called. Great, let's work with our partners to try to combat terrorism, but this is probably another big bloated bureaucratic government program with probably little oversight and a lot of money involved.
Now, I want to get to the VA, but I do want to make up one more point here about President Obama's statement and, of course, what Secretary Kerry said. He said this. He said, America understands its role of leadership in the world. Let me ask you then, with regard to all this and where this president is taking us, what is that role of leadership? What should it be? And what are we telling our friends and people around the world what it really is?
So I think this is the big problem with this administration. I don't think they have any idea. I think there is a lack of belief in American exceptionalism. I'm an unapologetic American exceptionalist. When you don't believe that America is the greatest country in the world, and you don't believe that we have a moral responsibility to lead the world because of all that we've been granted and given, then it's going to be hard to find a foreign policy. It's going to be reactionary. It's going to be trying to take half measures against Vladimir Putin. It's going to be trying to figure out what in the world you want to do in Syria because you have no real moral compass on it. I'm a believer that America's foreign policy needs to be this. Look, we don't want to be the world's police. We don't believe in being the world's police. We don't want troops in every country. But we do have to understand that we've been given a $17 trillion economy. We've been given some fantastic gifts, and we are a country that has a moral obligation to be a moral center for the rest of the world. When America retreats from the world, something's got to fill that vacuum. In the Middle East, it's been chaos and dictatorships and terrorism. In Asia, it's been China filling that vacuum. And in Europe, we've seen that vacuum filled by the Russians. So America's role needs to be to stand up for freedom around the globe, to be that shining city on the hill that Ronald Reagan talks so aptly about, and to do ultimately what's in our national interest. And what we've seen from this administration is no such focus. It's been a focus on more what are we going to do in the polls and how are we going to, ensure that Democrats win the Senate and Hillary wins in 2016.
All right, about 2.5 minutes I have left here. Let's switch gears here. The VA hospital scandal is a national disgrace. Seems every day there's another hospital where vets have been waiting too long for care. They suffer as a result. So, flat out, what do you think should be done right now?
This is big, bloated, bureaucratic government at its worst. I think right now in the backlog, people need to be granted access to a private doctor and private hospitals, and the VA needs to pay the tab. Let's get rid of the backlog. Let's focus on quality of care. I think General Shinseki needs to be fired or resign. Look, he's a great American, but he's had 6 years. No cabinet secretary usually lasts 6 years anyway. He's had 6 years, has not fixed the problem. I think he needs to go. There needs to be some major shakeup and changes at the VA. In 2007, when the scandal at Walter Reed happened, Secretary Gates fired a whole bunch of people, and things were turned around very quickly. I think President Obama needs to do that. But again, he's not a leader. He's very decisively indecisive, and we've seen that in the VA scandal too, and it's frankly atrocious.
What about those who would say pause for a moment here? Because you're certainly echoing what a lot of people are saying, and that is fire Shinseki right now, don't wait. But others who will say, take a pause, get somebody involved, launch a real investigation, find out what's going on, and then go after the right people. Because to some, it still seems a knee-jerk, and I understand your timing with regard to 6 years on and on and on.
Right.
But there are some who would say it's still a knee-jerk to fire right away out of the box.
Well, I think I would agree, except that this isn't right away. We had discussed, calling for Shinseki's resignation a year ago because of the backlog. Well, this is a year later, and we find out that there are secret waiting lists. This is criminality, and I'm not going to say he's a criminal, but he's allowed this to exist, and I think we need, frankly, somebody like a hospital administrator or somebody that understands health care, not necessarily the military. The VA is a health care company. It's not necessarily a military company, and so I think somebody with that kind of experience is who needs to lead this up and can take care of the backlog and help ensure our veterans get the best care they can.
About 30 seconds we have left here. Is it telling enough to you? And here's a statement that I pick out immediately where they're talking about Secretary Shinseki, where he says, the fact that there is evidence behooves us to take another thorough look. It's those two words in there.
Right.
Another thorough look. Weren't there supposed to be thorough looks throughout his administration? And why wait until now for something this thorough?
Well, this is political speak. Whenever people say thorough look, deep looks, and all that, it means that they're going to just push this off. And so that's what that is right now. Meanwhile, while Shinseki's waiting for a report, our veterans are waiting for care. It's unacceptable, and the president needs to, frankly, take a leadership role for once on something and come out and make some major changes and say that our veterans deserve the care that they deserve.
We would certainly hope that it would happen much sooner than later. Representative Adam Kinzinger, thank you so much for joining us here today on America's Forum.
Oh, it's great being with you. Thank you.
I still get down to those words, thorough investigation. I keep coming back to that when Eric Shinseki says that. This is the only time you've done a thorough investigation? Does that basically mean that up until this point there have been no investigations or everything has been surface? Just says, we're just playing a game at this point. That's frightening that it took this to get to that thorough, although we know that he claims it's thorough, but of course it hasn't been. Nothing has been.
I think there is enough, political will here now, and especially based on the reaction that we're hearing from the American public, the outrage of what's going on here, that a thorough investigation is the only acceptable resolution to this, at least a starting point for the resolution of this that the public is going to accept. I think right now, whether it be an election issue, a political issue, an issue that Americans care about, aside from jobs and the economy, this may have supplanted Obamacare, and maybe it's tied to it in some ways because we're talking about government health care, but this might be the issue that dominates the discussion this summer.
We have to keep thinking that these veterans are dying. I mean, we literally have men and women here who are dying, who can't walk, who have no real quality of life whatsoever. So as we continue to talk about this over and over again, and the politicians have something to say, how long is it going to take to get them the care that they need, all of them the care that they need? That's the thing that we still have to keep thinking about. There is no time to waste in this. This has to be done immediately. But we know how the gears of government grind.
And one of the solutions that's being talked about seriously right now is the idea of privatizing some of the folks on this waiting list. That certainly seems like an express lane that could open up here and get some of these vets, as we talked about. 115 days, according to a new Watchdog report, the average time that a veteran in Phoenix waited for an appointment there. It's simply unacceptable. I think privatization is something that's going to have to be continued to be talked about and implemented maybe as soon as possible.
Stop talking and get it done.
So that's the first thing I would say. All right, Ed, I'll be quiet. I'll stop talking.
No, not you, of course. John can talk all he wants to get it done.
All right, well, we're going to keep talking about the issues here in America's Forum. We'll be back with more, talking about today's top stories and more here on the program right after this commercial break.